For today's Which Word of the Day, I am choosing supernaturalism. Yeah, and supernaturalism is a theory that makes ethics depend on God. It teaches that the only source of moral rules is God. So something is good because God says it is, and the way to lead a good life is to do what God wants. I think that's problematic.
It is very problematic. We see a lot of wars and hatred done because I think it's easy for us, and I am guilty of this also. Like, we can make up whoever we're speaking to in our mind and make anything right or wrong in our own mind and like give justification to it, but it doesn't mean it's the right thing to do.
Yeah. And like, if something is good or bad, it should just be, regardless of what some higher power says. It should just be like a universal truth, I would think. But also, what if this God that you're like worshiping becomes corrupt, or it desires something that has been universally perceived as bad, and then all of a sudden people will just blindly follow that person, even if they morally don't agree with it, but because this God says it's right, then that's what you have to do.
Yeah, takes away free will and thinking.
Yeah, so something that might come up during this episode.
Huh.
You haven't even read that?
Wait, what are you doing with the book?
So he has the confidence to finish the story.
Hear now the words of the witches.
Can you hear the words of the witches? Yeah, the words of the witches.
Welcome to Words of the Witches, the Charmed podcast that will guide you through the lesser-known published lore of the Charmed universe.
In this night and in this hour, we call upon our fanboy power, bringing education and stupefaction to all of you.
Together, we will use our knowledge and reverence abundantly, but also find ourselves sassy and delightful.
Which is why we will truly be charmed.
This is Words of the Witches, episode 123. Episode 123. And I am Kevin, your resident Charmed resource.
And I'm Sean, and I just love the supernatural and following God blindly.
Oh, really? Okay. I'm so sorry. But anyway, yeah, so I got some stuff to talk about, but I want to go over our poll from last week first. If Charmed was another genre of show, what would you be out of the three options based off the essays we had last week? A fairy tale show, a show about middle-age witchcraft, or True Life, I'm a Witch? How do you think this might have went down? What are your guesses?
True Life, I'm a Witch.
So, Fairy Tale got the least amount of votes, 14%, 24 votes. And then True Life, I'm a Witch came in second place, 56 votes, 31%. The highest number of votes got Middle Age Witchcraft, 96 votes at 55%.
Wow.
Interessant.
Yeah, fuck my drag.
I then have a few things I want to talk about that also fit into the theme of this episode. I've got a TikTok comment yesterday on like the little clip I posted of the 90s Con Daytona convention, the little bonus episode I did about that, and someone commented on it. I watched the full episode of this on YouTube, and it's kind of like a jerk off of name drop. They name drop names. I'm like, okay. And then it says he's an Australian stalker and he's an American narcissist, but somehow it came together. Like,
Wow.
and I come to him like, thank you. I mean, name dropping. We're talking about the convention that happened to have the celebrities there, so of course we're going to be talking about the stars. It's not like we're just throwing it out there willy nilly. So that's one comment. I can't speak for Troy being a stalker or not. He might be. I don't know. But as far as the narcissist part, I'm going to say yes. I think very highly of myself, but I also have periods of humility. So I have those moments. I think it's important to love yourself, but also to think of others. And that's the difference between an actual narcissist and someone who is not.
I agree. Knowing you the way I do, I would not consider you a narcissist, because even though you are full of yourself and love yourself, you love other people and you go out of your way to make sure to connect with other people on a human level. Right. So you are definitely not a narcissist in my book.
Thank you. So I actually went to check on it today so I can read it, and it was deleted. So I'm like, interesting.
Interesting.
Because like I'm not going to delete that. I'm like, that's actually a very learning moment of a comment. So I'm like, okay. And it was kind of complimentary because it's like they pulled it off. I'm like, well, you obviously like the episode.
Yeah.
Also, some news about remember when I got kicked out of that Facebook group?
Ooh, yes.
I think I know who kicked me out based on
Oh.
the interaction I had with them at 90s Con. I didn't bring it up in that episode, but there was one particular person that was definitely obviously avoiding me and was very awkward around me. It was very weird. And I called them out on it. I talked to them and asked them what's going on, and then I was blocked. So I'm pretty sure they're the person that kicked me out of the group, and now they're mad that I'm back in the group, but still not telling me what I did or what's wrong. But yeah.
Jealousy.
Jealousy, or they perceive me in a certain way that's not true. I don't know. But I'm not going to name names because I'm not that kind of person. There we go. But let's move on. So today we'll be talking about continuing our Totally Charmed coverage. Totally Charmed. Uh, and we'll be talking section 3, their moral and magical world. So yeah, we're all up on the subject of morality bites. Oh my goodness, moral and magical world. This section starts off, it says, the moral and magical world, good and evil and blowing stuff up. The Hallowell's world is pretty simple most of the time. The good are innocent, the evil are vile, and magic cures all. Except when the sisters go evil, or when good screws up, or when the magic goes away. Dot, dot, dot.
Dot, dot, dot.
Yeah, and this section had 4 essays in them. I will start with the first one, which is 3 is a Magic Number by John G. Hemry. I want to say Henry, but it's Hemry.
Henry.
This essay talks about the importance of 3 and gives examples of it in mythology and folklore, pop culture, expressions, superstitions, belief systems like Christianity and Wicca, etc. Just gives you a lot of examples of 3 in our world. It talks about how like the law of 3 is shown in Morality Bites, how you keep abusing your powers in a certain way, it'll come back to you times 3 and force you to be, the future witch trials, and you might cause your execution. And then they talked about how it happened in A Witch in Time, wherein Phoebe kept saving Miles, and because her continuing to keep saving him would have eventually led to her death. So that was kind of a play on the 3 times 3 law. He went on about writing trilogies and what it's like writing the trilogy, and how like the middle book always suffers something. And then he talked about how people may be hardwired to see things in 3s because we like the proportion and the balance of it all. That's all I really got for this one. There's not much to discuss. What are your thoughts?
So yeah, this one was very boring to me. Because like it pointed out a lot of 3s, which was interesting, but I'm gonna be myself and be a little bitchy. I feel like Rob and I did a better job of looking at the 3 on Brunch with the Hollowells than this essay did. Because we talked about the Macbeth witches, which this one did, but we also talked about how they were even inspired by the Fates. And then I remember we even talked about how 3 may even come down to the first thing you see as a baby is your mother's eyes and her mouth. So that may be even why the 3 is ingrained, the 3 sacred holes. So I don't know. This one didn't get into 3 as much as I would have liked it to. It just kind of surface levels like, look, lots of 3s everywhere. Okay, bye.
Yeah, that was my sentiment exactly. Because, I mean, it was cool to see the patterns and all the instances of 3 that occurred in our world. Like, it's nice to have it all laid out there. Clearly, the number 3 is important in our society, but we don't really get an answer why that is. And he doesn't really speculate much on it. It didn't offer much other than giving us example after example of 3 being used.
I did think like some of the 3s were even kind of forced to me, like when it was like, oh look, when you start a family, mom, dad, child, look, that's 3. There's 3 right there. I'm like, yeah, but what if they have another baby? That's 4.
Yeah.
I don't know, it just seems silly after a while.
Super weird. Beetlejuice.
Yeah, that was in there.
So I'm like, okay, this was a throwaway essay for sure.
Yeah.
All right, talk about our next one, Sean.
Oh my god, I just saw like how many notes I took from my last essay compared to this one. I obviously enjoyed my last essay more than the second one. All right. Our second one is Charmed into Goodness by Anne Perry. The biggest thing this one kind of talks about is with power comes great responsibility, which is something that Anne kind of said a few times. Um, so the sisters have to make sacrifices to not only keep their powers in check, but to also grow into new powers. With more power, we see in the show, it becomes harder for them to control the power and not use it for personal gain. We also saw many characters like steal powers, especially demons, where their downfall is the fact that even though they've stolen this power, they may not have the responsibility or know how to control that power. It does talk about how we by nature get very vengeful. I really like this part. Like, we seek that vengeance even if we don't have all the information sometimes. So like we should all strive, and in the show we should strive to see both sides before we go in like with claws and attack. Um it talked a lot about how the Charmed One's powers are triggered by emotions, same with White Lighters. And like the Charmed Ones, sometimes we need failure to teach us a valuable lesson. So it talked about how there's multiple episodes where they didn't save the innocent, but they learned from it and they grew from it. So don't take failure as a bad thing. And it talks about how when Leo dulls Piper's pain, it affects her magic since she doesn't have that emotion driving her power. So she had no frame of reference for what caused the pain or what she learned from the emotions and the pain. So she lost her morality. So I thought this one had, I think, some interesting points to it. I liked it a lot better than the first essay, but it still wasn't like my favorite.
Okay. I'm going to go over some notes I had for this one too, because I noticed a lot of different things. I put that she says fairy tales of good and evil show us hope and courage in the world, and they provide wisdom. That to gain success from your talents, you still have to pay the price. So that means like to fulfill our destinies, we have to embrace something that is a part of us, despite the heartache that comes with it. And if we fail to accept that, we may live in a safer place, but then our talent is squandered. So you have to kind of choose. How do we continue to use our power judiciously and not abuse it? That's a constant in our world. We are only accountable for ourselves. Powers come from emotions, which you touched upon, and it says our emotions impel us to acts that indifference can never achieve. So I feel like she wrote things very poetically in this essay, which is really nice. She said stories help us in our own trials and tribulations of life and show us we are not alone, and we do have it in us to lose with grace when we fail. So, sometimes if we lose or we have a failure, it's easy to get, aggressive or angry or like fall into depression. But to accept that failure gracefully is the higher road, and it's very rare. And then she gives some charmed examples, like Paige. We talked about this when we covered Soul Survivor on Hanging with the Halliwells. How Paige's decision to intervene in Soul Survivor to save Larry, because it was a deal that he made on his own. She had no part of it. He was responsible for all of the bad stuff in it. But knowing that she could help, and still, it's not easy to just walk away when he's not as bad as he seems. There's an innocent man in there, which was very interesting. And in Apocalypse Not, Piper and Phoebe make the very difficult decision to sacrifice Prue, because they know that's what she would have done. And then they have nobility and honor was the choice they made over personal love. And that's the act that saved them all. So that's another kind of constant and charmed. And then this is one he's brought up, how Love's a Witch brings up the notion that we need our privacy to work out our dreams and mistakes. And we also need the protection of not knowing sometimes. So we have to live a certain degree of uncertainty in life so that we can move forward. Too much knowledge can be paralyzing. And it's best that we don't know what everyone's thinking and feeling at the same time, even though we want to. And then we detach our own experiences of morality to avoid pain. And when we do that, this is the Piper section. When we do that, we lose reality and fall into madness. And then we have no compassion or framework for coping. And then we must accept that light and dark in the world so that we have the capability to choose. Otherwise, we're just lost. And then they said this really nice thing: it is the courage to feel that is the core of life. So I got a lot out of this essay.
You did. You got a lot more than me.
Yeah, I thought it was so beautiful and thought provoking, and it was written so masterfully. Like the language was really moving. I thought she showcased perfect examples of charm that showcased her observations, and it really delved into the heart of timeless tales, the fairy tales, particularly the good and evil battle and the personal growth, and how that teaches us how to approach our real world. So I thought this was a fantastic essay. So the next one was "Why Are the Elders Such Jerks" by Richard Garfinkel. I love
And
that
it
name.
definitely gives us an answer.
Well, it does, but not. It's weird because it barely talks about it. It does give us a very short answer to that question, but it talks about a bunch of other stuff around it, which is like, okay.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of notes for this one too. He starts off with the notion that why are the good guys so annoying when they're good and prone to falling towards bad whenever the slightest adversity strikes? So that was his goal of the essay. And it says, modern writers have a very difficult time writing for transcendental good. So this ultimate good, it's a very hard thing to write in modern media, he thinks. He says, a moral code is set up in a lot of media between who you can blast and who you can leave alone. However, that moral code is prejudiced, often prejudiced. So it's either by racist or speciesist or whatever. It's, it's like us or them based on what color shirt you wear. He often used that analogy. um, and then he gives the example that Cole killing a human apparently makes him evil, but if he killed a weaker demon, no one would have blinked an eye. So what's the difference? Why is it, it's so funny that way? Like, oh, because you killed a bad person, it doesn't matter. But if you kill a human, but it's essentially the same thing. He gives like a definition of good, how good seeks to reduce suffering while evil seeks to create suffering or is indifferent. He says Charmed is essentially a superhero show, pretty battles between good and evil, but the fights are meaningless in exploring the dichotomy. It means it doesn't really go anywhere besides being flashy. He says the transformative allegories of good and evil are lost, that the triumph over evil does not make them better people. While they do grow as humans in this series, it has no correlation between the moral battles. He says something very interesting about Phoebe I thought was really cool. Because he says how Phoebe has the greatest of the gifts because if she embraced her power and because of her intimacy with evil, her closeness to evil, she could have gained understanding of consequences of actions on all levels. She would learn how actions affect other people, how people affect other people, and the true purpose of good and evil in the world. She would know all this. She would become like this oracle of sorts and be like this really all-seeing kind of person, which would have led to an arc where Phoebe has to cope with knowing more suffering will occur than she can prevent, and that would be a kind of her inner turmoil. And then she would have been put in a. This is when the Cole was the source. When Cole was the source, if she recognized all this by that time, she would have been put in a position to help Cole overcome the source, and then making her a key figure in the battle for Cole's soul. That would have made her a real dynamic force in there, and I think the relationship would have gotten stronger, or worse, but at least in a different way. So he mourns that what we got instead was that cliche soap opera stuff, and Phoebe became a watered down advice columnist. He says Phoebe's fight instead was to stay human, which can be a compelling story, but it wasn't one of real soldiers in the moral ambiguity of the battlefield. So instead of, having this cool, like real gritty, deep in the ether of the battle, it's just a typical black and white story that's common. And he's like, it could have been so much more.
Yeah.
And then he finally got into the elders after all this other stuff.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's a weird title for the essay because it's not really about that. It's more about something else. It could have been. I think the title should have been different. But he says the elders now represent the crux of modern good, which is self-righteousness, arrogance, and the elders claim complete monopoly over what is right and wrong. And he says that true good people are cautious and have humility enough to judge themselves before they judge anyone else. We might have talked about this a little bit at the beginning of the episode. So in order for the elders to be good, they must be humble. They must be aware of the great honor and difficulty their task is, and with their vast divine knowledge, they should be able to sense that they are actually a small part of the world and be okay with that. Uh, but that's not what they are. In the case of Piper and Leo, they took a military stance about no fraternization as opposed to trusting the power of love. They were self-righteous and did whatever they could to crush love. So it's weird that they are not upholding what is considered a true good virtue. And they took no notice of the suffering they created. And true good people always have a sense of remorse whenever they do cause suffering in people. So, mm-hmm. Elders suck. Elders suck. But I mean, that's gives a concrete answer about why they're jerks in a very base form. So I did appreciate that. He says the point of this essay is that the problem with modern writers is that they write under a psychological lens, and they look for what is wrong in a character and not what is right with a character. So they're actually blind to goodness. They feel that healthy, well-adjusted people are not interesting, so they don't even think about writing for their strengths. But the author argues that healthy people have their share of problems too, and people should be brave enough to explore that. Uh, he also says death in Charmed is not the ineffable tragedy it is in the real world. He says dead people not only return, but they bring souvenirs, which, yes, I think is very common in Charmed with, Leo, Grams, Patty, things like others, ghosts. But in the case of Prue, that's one instance that stuck, that has meaning, that has weight. So while I mourn that she never returned, I think that also brings some sort of really powerful allegories on death and what death really is like.
Yeah, and I would argue, even though Grams and Patty get to come back and visit, like, it's still not in a way that they're back. They only get these little snippets of time, and it's not easy for them to come back. And the sisters can't touch them or hold them or be with them. They just get like, "Hey, I'm here to help you fight this demon or give you some knowledge," and then I gotta get back up to the hair stylist in the sky.
Yeah, they do have very limited time, but at the same time, they do become corporeal. Both Patty and Grams, they come back and they do get the hug, they do get to touch. So
Rarely.
a lot of the time.
Okay.
um, it starts off with them as ghosts, but then Graham just steps out of her bubble. She's like, "Okay, look at me, I'm here." She hugs Paige. She walks around. She gives a wickening. She holds Wyatt. It's all like, "Here I am." And then she by the coven. Patty's back, and she's like, "Oh, let me touch your hair, la 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 la." And even in Just Harried, when the elders sent Patty down, she's like, "I held you." She hugs them. It's like they're really there. It's like they never truly died. So I do see that argument. I mean, granted, it is very few and far between. Um, in the grand scheme, but when you watch the show all at once, you do see it very common occur.
Okay.
This his last thing was he thinks that no one can ever depict real good because of the need for conflict, which is people feel like the conflict has happened in stories. That's what we're taught, right? But he says if conflict is necessary to stories, then no one can ever be good enough to minimize the conflicts in their own life. Which I do see that argument. I feel like that is incredibly challenging to write.
So this one did make me laugh a little because I feel like the writer kind of answered his own question without realizing it in a way, because he was like, good has to go through struggles, good has to fall from grace like Leo did. And I'm like, well, you just answered Leo's the ultimate good. Because I don't know, I
Yeah.
kind of feel like this writer is probably older than us. And the reason I say that, I feel like they come from a time where the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants was a thing, where evil
Yeah.
was like, we are evil, we're here to be evil, we're going to
Exactly.
be evil. And I feel like as a society, we've grown past that. And when we look at the elders specifically, I know they didn't really talk about the elders much, but I feel like the elders to me represent religion and what it's doing to our society. I think a lot of people who are very religious to a point where they don't see people different than them anymore, they turn into the elders because everything is about rules. And if you're not following those rules, then you're evil. They don't see the grayness in between everything. So I like that the elders are like this. I think if the elders weren't so stringent and so like good to a fault in a way, like they don't even see the in between anymore, then the charmed ones wouldn't have any adversity and any reason to rebel and fight against them in order to live their lives the way they want to.
It's interesting because while the Trumans are a force of good, they also have problems with this supposed leading force, and they question the authority, which I think is something that everyone should do. At least get answers and are allowed to have those answers and shape their own beliefs. You don't necessarily have to follow the code you're taught or what people expect of you when you can have your own critical thinking.
Yeah. Yeah, so I appreciate what he said. I appreciate his point of view and what he said. I just didn't agree with it a lot of times. I think some of these writers, it's kind of what I see with Star Wars. I think they want a lot more than what we're bargained for. Like this, at the end of the day, as great as it is, Charmed is a show by Aaron Spelling. So it's gonna be soap opera-y. It's not gonna
Mhm.
be like these sprawling, deep storylines. Like it is what it is. It's a show about witches that have one-off episodes that we're gonna come back for every week. So some of these
Yeah.
writers, I just want to be like, why don't you just be happy with it? If like if
Yeah.
you wanted to
Even he
dig deeper, go watch Salem.
Right. He even admits he's like, is it too much to ask for a 40-minute show? Maybe. I do think he is critical of Charmed without sounding bitter or hate filled. I think he gives credence to the points he wants to make, but at the same time, I feel like there's more nuance to Charmed than he gives it credit for.
Mhm.
I didn't find any real fault in anything he said, but I feel like there is definitely addendums and there's ways that we can argue his points. Um, so I would have other ways to you know combat his observations, even though what his points I thought he made good points, but there's more to the story than what
Yeah.
he's saying. So
Mhm.
all right, tell us about our last one.
All right. Evil. Can't live with it. Can't quite vanquish it by Kate Donovan. So Kate's point is without evil, there would be nothing to push the sisters to do good. They would just be normal people going about their day. So evil and good need to exist to impel people to be better. Kate shows us that literature is full of people we consider good, but they may have stumbled here and there, like Adam and Eve, or like King David, or Guinevere. So this is kind of used as a comparison to the sisters because they are just ordinary people, and each of them, within at this point 7 seasons, but we know 8, and 2 comic seasons. Of course, they're going to turn bad at some point because they're going to be tempted or they're going to show some sort of weakness. So we see that even when they turn evil, it helps them appreciate goodness more because they take with them what they learned from being evil, or they take with them the danger they are as a powerful person if they are evil. So it says here, and I totally agree with this, it's easier to be good without temptations around you. So that makes me think of like, what's that stupid show? Too Hot to Handle. If you just put these people on an island, like, yeah, they can sit around and probably not get into trouble. But when you start putting lube in front of them and sex toys, yeah, they're going to be tempted
Right.
and it's going to be harder to be good. Um, the charmed ones are portrayed to have flaws that evil can exploit, and that's what makes them even more interesting is the fact that they do have this free will.
Mhm.
And Kate used San Francisco as a big example because their flaws were the doorway for the sin balls to infect them.
Right.
And then once the balls infected them, it only served to make them grow stronger and wiser through their tribulations. And it talked about how Cole was the perfect example of good versus evil. But what was different and interesting about Cole is, as a human, he wanted nothing more than to protect Phoebe, and that was his impetus to be good. But in order to be good, a lot of times he had to tap into the evil power here, the demonic power he had, which kind of made him lean the other way back to being a demon. But he had no choice because he was trying to protect Phoebe. So that was a
Mhm.
cool little point out. Um, uh, so this I should probably say Kate had it kind of in sections. So we had the Cole section, and then we went to the personal loss. And I didn't touch on all the sections, just the ones that I thought had something interesting to say.
Yeah.
It said, personal loss will always plague good people, but it will not make them falter to be good. For example, the Charmed ones lost their mother and grandma in Prue, but it only pushes them to fight harder to save what they still have. So that's their reason to exist. And I really like Kate's take on the elders. Kate said that the elders have trouble seeing right from wrong because they've lost their free will. So, since they don't have free will, they can't understand or remember what it is to be good and what it is to be human. So, that's why when they make these decisions, they don't have the internal good and evil struggle that the charmed ones have or what humanity has. So they're not seeing the bigger picture. And same thing goes for demons. They can't comprehend what it is to be good. They can't comprehend why people want to be good. So humanity, according to Kate, will always be stronger than demons because we are always struggling with that good and evil. So we understand what it is to be both. We walk in both worlds, whereas demons only see the evil, elders only see the good. So they don't understand that path we walk on. Um, and then Kate kind of ended with this idea, which I loved. Um, Kate argues that the Charmed Ones, even though the show's always about them wanting to vanquish all evil, or evil wanting to vanquish all good, it's never going to happen because you can't have one without the other. Evil feeds off of, or demons feed off of corrupting things and people. So if there's nobody left to corrupt, then they don't have a purpose. And same with good. If there's not evil for good to fight against, there's nothing to fight and there's nothing to make them stronger because there's no challenge anymore at that point. And then I love that she did make the point free will is the greatest gift of all, which serves the charmed ones. But then she threw in the avatars and she's like, they were just a conundrum because Cole called them out for being evil right away. And even though they said they were neutral, all the tactics they used were the tactics used by evil. So they were just kind of there.
I did like the thing that she said about Cole because she says that he demonstrates the human ability to be unselfish, and you, like you said, his reasons for being good or evil were all dependent on Phoebe. That it was all Phoebe all the time. To be so compassionate and thinking about one other person besides yourself is very human. And so she talked about Chris too, how he would do anything to stop Wyatt's evil reign, even if he had to kill his brother to do it, and that was a very compelling thing. To have to get rid of a loved one, and how that arc could have, really been something crazy. Demons don't fight for evil; they fight for themselves, and their choices are either to move up the ranks, get vanquished, or stay at their status quo and not move up at all. And she says there's no greater evil. We always talk about a greater good, but there's no greater evil because evil is selfish and individual. And that she considers avatars evil pretty much because they rob humanity of choice. So, yeah, I do like some of this. I do have some canonical errors here, and
Canonical.
some of them are the things you like.
Uh-oh.
Only because I feel like she is very black and white with her observations, but there is more gray area than she actually knows. And I think there's more gray area than Charmed wants you to know. But if you really get into what Charmed is, it's there. We talked about this in my morality series too, the bonus episodes. The first canonical error is she keeps calling uh, the guy with the sin box the infector. Like, stop using that term like it was his official name. His name was Lucas. Yes, he was a demonic sin infector, so you're not technically wrong, but it's not his name because he was like the infector, capital I. So that bothered me just a little bit. Now it goes in, I have a canonical error about the elders. She says the elders were once human. I don't know if that's true for all of them because the elders are supposed to be elder white letters that ascended, right? But didn't the elders create the white lighters? So it's very chicken
True.
or the egg. How could have they been white lighters if the elders created the white lighters to begin with? There had to be first elders first.
Mm-hmm. True.
So I believe some elders have never been human and have never been a white lighter and were just always an elder, like some force that was appointed, maybe by the angels of destiny, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And that adds more credence to why they're so disconnected from, humanity and why they're so self-righteous, because they're like this, we are the ones, we are the God, you need to worship us. And then she said that demons don't have any good in them at all. And I argue that they do all the time. Because she even contradicts herself when she says that they can get infected with good. She uses Cole as an example as infected with good as human. But we've seen other demons that have good streaks in them. Especially in season 7, Kira the Seer and Billy Zane, Drake, and even the Oracle in season 4, who sacrifices herself to save the source. Why would they do that if they had no good in them or no care in them? So I think demons do have the capacity for good, but they are conditioned to reject it. And like she said, they're not fully equipped to understand it when it happens. So they're often confused or embarrassed or try to squander that when it does arise. So there's that. But yeah, I feel like demons and elders and things are more similar to humans than we actually give them credit for. I think it's something that they try to just keep hush hush. Yeah, the way that it was written, the language and the format almost felt like a high school essay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do like. There's things I liked about them. I think there are some nice observations. There was a lot that stated the obvious as well, but
Yeah.
yeah, it was fine. Cool, and that's our essays.
Woohoo.
So then we have our tips for future white lighters.
Oh, we're really just messengers? Guides? Think of us as guardian angels for good witches.
Tips for future white lighters.
I was out being a force of good in the universe.
I think I've probably used this before, but I still try to throw it out there as much as I can. I think the main thread I see in all 4 of these is there's no ultimate good and there's no ultimate evil. Everything in this world is a gray space. So I think everybody should do their best to not think of not all police are evil, not all Republicans are evil. We need to learn from our opposition and we need to be better because of it. And even if you're not best friends with your opposition, at least understanding their side and why they believe what they do can help you grow as a person.
Nice. Absolutely. Yeah. Black and white just doesn't really exist in the real world. There's so much nuance and so much complexity in the human condition, in people, in everything. So you just have to figure out where you sit, where you lie. So for my tip for you, future white lighter, is take your pick, because I thought there was so many wonderful things that we could live by in a number of these essays. So I'm just going to choose this one because it's something that I have been victim of lately, and I kind of hinted on at the beginning, and it's good practice. So I'm going to go with the one I said before, that true good people have humility enough to judge themselves before they judge anyone else. We don't know what everyone is going through, and we don't need to know, because I get so upset when people don't like me, or if I've unknowingly caused negative thoughts about myself in people, and I have this incessant need to know why people may not like me. But it's not about me. It's about them, their perceptions, their experiences. And I've had to learn this too. The best thing you can do is to move on. Keep doing you. Be the you know you are. And people that don't want you in their life don't matter. It can suck because you have to lose friends or whatever, but life is too short to fight that hard. Just live your life and do you. And the people that are meant to be in your life will be in your life. I'm giving you that tip because it's something that I have to do myself and keep reminding myself. So the last thing we have for today is P is for Pole.
Piper. You mean it's just you and Prue, huh?
Phoebe? Phoebe, you there?
And a big hello to you too, Penny.
Come on, Patty. The rest is up to them.
Paige, I
My name is Paige.
Another P, imagine that.
P is for Paul.
And this is just a no context. Pick your favorite one. Your options are good, bad, or the guy with the gun. And I'm picking the guy with the gun because it's the neutrality of it all.
I'm gonna say bad because I've always gone against the grain, and like I feel like less people would pick that, and it would be more fun. I want to be bad.
I wanna be bad, makes me feel so good. Oh my gosh, I heard that song forever, and it just came to my mind. How fun! All right,
You're welcome.
maybe that will be the song for this week. I don't know. All right. Well, that's it, spell worders. Thanks for going down this rabbit hole journey with us. Next week we'll talk about their material world. So, Sean, tell us where we can find you.
You can find me on Sean Perrette on Instagram. That'll link you to my book, all of our other projects and podcasts. And that's where I post stuff from the Uncanny Experience from this past week. Yay! See Kevin sing, see Kevin
Yes.
run, see Kevin Cyclops.
Oh my gosh, I'm so scared and lovely. Yeah, I've been posting a lot of pictures on my personal Instagram too of the Uncanny Experience. That's of X-Men-ness. And it's KJEEZY87. Or you can follow this podcast at Words of the Witches, all the places except for Twitter, where that's Words of Witches. And yeah, next week we will see you. Should be right on schedule then. Yeah, so soon, spell worders, soon and very soon we are going to see our kid. What? That's religious. Your destiny still awaits.
Bam.
Bam. Thank you, ma'am.